Welcome to Life Stories, where real lives unfold through heartbreak, resilience, and powerful lessons. Today's story is one of betrayal at the deepest level. A loving husband accused of a crime he didn't commit, a mother who risked everything, even her children, and a battle for truth that shook a family to its core. It's a journey of love, loss, and the unbreakable spirit of a father determined to reclaim his life. Subscribe to the channel to begin today's story, because sometimes the most unbelievable tales are the ones that are true. They say the people closest to you have the greatest power to destroy you. I never truly understood that until I saw my wife weep on live television, claiming I had tried to kill her and our children. My name is Ethan Walker. Until a few months ago, I was a husband, a father of two beautiful 6-year-olds, Logan and Ella, and the proud founder of a precision engineering firm in Boulder, Colorado. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Quiet, structured, meaningful. And then, without warning, it crumbled, every piece shattered by the one person I trusted most. The day it all began felt surreal. I sat behind the cold glass of a police interrogation room, watching Danielle, my wife of 15 years, put on the performance of her life. She sat across from Detective Mark Harris, crying for the cameras, mascara streaking her cheeks, as she clutched a photo of our children like a grieving widow. "He cut the brake lines," she whispered between sobs. "Ethan wanted us all dead, for the insurance money." She looked into the camera then, not with fear, not with pain, but with something else, something colder, triumph. At first, I was too stunned to react. My attorney, Lucas Grant, leaned over and whispered, "Don't flinch, don't move. That's exactly what they want." But my silence wasn't strategy, it was shock. I had loved Danielle since university. She studied communications with a flair for theater, while I buried myself in the lab, chasing precision and certainty. She brought spontaneity to my life. Laughter, light, or so I thought. The cracks had begun to show months earlier, but I'd ignored them, written them off as stress, as normal drift in a long marriage. Late nights, locked phone screens, lingerie I hadn't seen before. I never imagined betrayal. I was too immersed in my work, too trusting of the life we had built. Then came the accident. 3 weeks ago, Danielle insisted on driving Logan and Ella to school, even though she usually preferred her SUV. I offered to take them, but she was oddly adamant. An hour later, the call came. There had been a crash. The brakes had failed. By some miracle, no one was seriously hurt. I rushed to the hospital only to be met by officers who read me my rights. Danielle had already told them everything. The evidence stacked up quickly. Life insurance policies worth $2 million, ones Danielle herself had suggested, but now claimed I had arranged with dark intent. Financial records indicating my company was in trouble. My fingerprints on the brake system, naturally, since I maintained the car myself. And the most damning detail, a history of online searches about brake failure, apparently from my laptop. Lucas tried to reassure me, "It's circumstantial. We can fight this." But I could feel it, how the narrative had already taken root in the public mind. The devoted father turned cold-blooded murderer. A cautionary tale. The worst part wasn't the handcuffs. It was the look in my children's eyes as they were taken to Danielle's sister's house. Confused. Afraid. I had held those children the moment they were born, sung them to sleep, told them stories of robots and rockets and all the beautiful things we would build together. And now they were being taught to fear me. That night in jail, I didn't sleep. I stared at my hands, hands that had built a company from nothing, hands that had carried my babies through illness and scraped knees, hands now shackled by a lie. That was the night something inside me shifted. The pain didn't fade, but it hardened, focused. Danielle thought she had broken me. She had no idea what she had awakened. I was an engineer, a builder. And if they had constructed a perfect frame around me, then I would disassemble it, piece by piece, until nothing remained but truth. In the weeks that followed, my world shrank to the size of a jail cell. Time moved differently there, measured not in hours, but in the weight of waiting. Waiting for news of my children, waiting for a hearing, waiting to feel like my life was still mine. Lucas visited regularly, each time bringing more pieces of a puzzle that had been twisted against me. But in that claustrophobic space, I found clarity. Because when all else is stripped away, your freedom, your reputation, even your sense of safety. Only truth remains, and I held on to mine with everything I had. Lucas was the first to say it aloud. They framed you, Ethan. This wasn't just a lie, it was a design. He laid out the evidence that was meant to bury me. Financials doctored to make it seem like my company, Walker Precision Systems, was on the verge of collapse. But we weren't. We just signed a government contract, a breakthrough. I should have been celebrating. Instead, someone had used it to fabricate a motive. Then there was the digital trail. My laptop showing searches about brake failure, vehicle sabotage. But Lucas was skeptical. Someone could have used your computer remotely, or late at night while you were asleep. I thought of Danielle then, how she used to come in late from her charity events, how she brushed off a message I'd once glimpsed on her phone. When can we meet again? I can't stop thinking about you. The sender, Greg from work, she had said with a laugh. Except now we knew Greg was Detective Mark Harris, the same man who had taken over the investigation, the man who had comforted my wife on camera like they shared a private grief, the man who used to work cybercrimes before homicide, a man with the knowledge and access to manipulate evidence. That's when the shift happened. Lucas brought in an independent investigator and a private forensic lab. We need our own eyes on everything, he said, because the people who are supposed to protect the truth might be the ones burying it. Then came the first flicker of light. My sister, Courtney, had access to my office. I had forgotten about a recent upgrade I'd installed, a discrete cloud backup system for our home's security footage. One Danielle never knew about. The old system stored recordings locally, and she and Harris likely wiped it clean after tampering with the car. But the new system? It saw everything. Courtney retrieved the footage and brought it to Lucas's office. We watched it in silence. There, grainy but clear, was Danielle letting Harris into the garage. 2-7, he wore gloves. She stood watch. He worked under the hood of my car, the same car that would fail the next morning. Lucas paused the footage. They thought they were invisible, but they weren't. It was the first moment since my arrest that I felt something real stir inside me. Hope. Not naive or blind, but earned. This wasn't over. The truth was no longer hiding. We were pulling it back into the light. The morning of the trial, I stood on the courthouse steps with Lucas at my side, a storm of cameras in front of us and months of pain behind me. Every step I took into that courtroom was not just about my innocence. It was about reclaiming the voice that had been stolen from me. For my children. For myself. Danielle was already seated inside, dressed modestly, hair pulled back. She looked every bit the grieving wife. But I no longer saw the image she wanted to project. I saw the woman who had kissed her lover in our garage while planning a performance that nearly destroyed her family. Beside her sat Detective Harris, his face cold, unreadable, but I noticed the subtle tension in his jaw when he glanced toward me. The prosecution painted me as a man pushed to desperation, financially unstable, emotionally distant, and with the expertise to carry out a subtle, fatal plan. It was clinical, convincing, but not complete. Then Lucas stood. He didn't just argue facts. He told the jury a story, a human story. He spoke of love turned to betrayal, of truth buried under the weight of appearances. And then he introduced the evidence. The surveillance footage. The forensic reports showing the brake line wasn't cleanly cut. It had been partially severed and chemically treated to fail later. That compound? Unique to my company. Stored in a restricted lab. A lab Harris's former colleague, Mitchell Reese, my head of security, had accessed without cause. Lucas called in witness after witness. My sister, Courtney, the mechanic, Tony Alvarez, who had reluctantly confessed he provided the specialized cutting tool after Harris claimed it was for a training exercise. And finally, Officer Tyler Jenkins, the rookie who'd arrived first at the crash scene. He spoke with quiet integrity. Detective Harris told me to patrol that exact road that morning, said there were complaints, but after the crash, I realized it felt rehearsed. That Walker kept mentioning the insurance, her husband, his behavior, like she wanted me to write it down exactly. And then the final blow, a maintenance worker named Carlos Ramirez. He'd been inspecting sprinklers that morning near the crash site. He had photos. Danielle and Harris, standing at the barrier an hour before the accident, measuring, pointing, planning. The courtroom held its breath. When the verdict came, I didn't cry. I just closed my eyes and felt something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. Not guilty. Not just legally, but morally. Publicly. Truthfully. Danielle and Harris were arrested that same day. Charges of conspiracy, evidence tampering, and fraud. Mitchell Reese confessed shortly after, his own guilt etched across every line of his face. 6 months later, my kids and I moved to a quiet place just outside Denver. They're healing. We're healing. I've learned that rebuilding trust isn't just about proving you were right. It's about becoming the kind of person your children can look to when everything else collapses. This is my story. Not of revenge, but of resilience. Because sometimes justice doesn't come crashing in like thunder. Sometimes it's engineered, piece by patient piece. As I stand here today, looking out at my children, Logan and Ella, playing in the backyard, I realize how far we've come. The darkness that threatened to consume us has faded, replaced by the soft glow of resilience and hope. They are safe. We are safe. And that's what matters. The road wasn't easy, but then again, nothing worthwhile ever is. I've spent years rebuilding more than just my company. I've rebuilt my family. I've rebuilt myself. The pain of betrayal never fully disappears. But what I've learned is that it's not about erasing the scars. It's about using them to shape something better, something stronger. Every challenge, every wound has taught me the value of trust, of empathy, and of standing firm in the face of adversity. Danielle thought she could tear apart everything I had built. But she underestimated one thing. I'm not just an engineer of machines. I'm an engineer of my own fate. And when they tried to frame me, I dismantled their lies with the same precision I applied to every project I've ever undertaken. The truth is a machine in itself, imperfect at times, but always functional, always designed to prevail. And now my focus is where it belongs. On my children, on my work, on the future we're creating together. I've reclaimed my life. I've reclaimed my peace. And that's the greatest victory of all. If you've enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to Life Stories for more videos about real-life journeys, triumphs, and the lessons that make us stronger. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the next video.